I'm Hollis Taylor, and I'm a non-binary person, and I call myself a divine androgen. Be like saying that you're a monk or a practitioner of magic or something like that. Maybe it depends on what path you walk. See, one of the things I noticed as I started to come out and started to identify as non-binary, I started to realize that there was no spiritual path for people like me. There were some things like indigenous people, but I don't want to culturally appropriate. I didn't grow up on a reservation. And I think Two-Spirit is great, and I want them to keep it. And I felt like I had to define my own path, because I didn't have a huge background in these things. And so I started to explore things. And, of course, some religions shame us, right? And then there's some religions that don't even include us, like Wicca. I went to many rituals, and never, not once, did they mention someone that was both or neither gender or god or goddess. Unless you asked, and then they would often have a goddess or something. But there was no language for it. And so as I started my own spiritual path, my own path of holistic learning, I learned that I really needed a spiritual path in order to be who I was. I felt like it was part of humanity. It was part of being a human. And I needed to be celebrated in my spiritual path. I needed to be seen, and I didn't want any of the shame. So that's not for me. That's theirs. And so as I started to unfold, I started to realize that I had my own path, and each one of us actually do. You do. Everybody does. Has their own spiritual path that they're to unlock. Your authenticity is in your heart, just like it was in mine. There were some things I had to go through to unlock those keys, to get closer to who I really was inside. Because all of us are divine conscious beings, and you have to work through some weird stuff sometimes, like cultural norms, and gender roles, and gosh, mental health and the crap your parents programmed in there. Sometimes we have to unfold that out. And when we do, we get to an authentic surface, an authentic person when we move through those surface things. And when we find our authenticity, we can go deeper. We can love deeper. We can love ourselves deeper. We can love other people deeper. And we can enjoy our life fuller and more, and feel more complete by the time it comes time to, end, because we all die. None of us get out of alive. So just consider, as you start to identify and find your gender is not something that was given, that is not something that was assigned to you when you were born. As you start to realize your gender expression, no matter what it is, I'm talking to the drag queens, the drag kings, the gay guys, transgender people, non-binary people, gender-neutral people, all of us, we're all here for a reason. The divine sent us here. We're all here to define our own path. Make it what it is. Follow that part of you that doesn't follow the rules. The part of you that doesn't do what other people are doing, because that part of you will lead you to the path you need to be on, and you will manifest the beautiful things that the world desperately needs. All of us are where we need you. We need you to step up and bring your most beautiful light to the world. And I hope that that's what this book does. That my book, Divine Androgen, A Sacred Path for Gender Variant People, and this channel will inspire you to find out who you are and open it up to the world and deliver it. As if we were all waiting for it, but we didn't know what we were waiting for exactly. Show us what that is.
Welcome to Rainbow Soul, an explorative discussion about spirituality beyond mainstream religions. Hollis Taylor, author, psychic, astrologer, and alchemical mage, brings their non-binary perspective together with fellow drag king and trans man Lacrosse Ortiz, a Jewish Taino with spiritual background of exploration that has led him to an atheist perspective. Join these guys as they explore deep and difficult topics, all related to spirituality, offering a queer perspective, an exploration of interesting topics, and engaging guests to help explore conversations for the Rainbow Soul.
Hey, hey, welcome Lacrosse. It's so good to see you.
Same. It's been a whole week.
Yeah, right? And man, what a great week it's been, actually. Interesting week.
Yeah, for the most part, yes. Busy.
Yeah,
It's felt busy.
everybody's probably really busy, I notice.
Yeah.
And that probably has a lot to do with our topic today.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to first say that I was so excited to finally get my shirt.
Yes, nice.
Because
Look at that.
because non-binary is
Yes.
sacred.
Yes.
Right?
Very
So so I was super excited. And you guys, we have t-shirts. If you're looking for a t-shirt, you want to support Rainbow Soul, just go to we're still working on our website. We'll get it done. Rainbowsoul.show. Just go there and you'll be able to order yourself a t-shirt and sweatshirts, all kinds of great stuff in there. So, I look forward to seeing you all there, seeing you awesome shirts on there. And if nothing else, that's like the best part, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is sacred. And it does say Rainbow Soul on the back.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm so glad I got my shirt finally this week. So we'll be talking more about t-shirts and got maybe some contests coming up and things like that. So, but Lacrosse, I've been excited all week, and I know you have too about this week's topic.
Yes, I have my notebook, my pen. I am ready.
You are ready, right?
Ready.
Because here's the thing, is that this week's topic, everybody, is astrology. Like, first of all, like, why do people do astrology? Why is it important? Stuff like that. We're going to answer questions like that. But the thing about astrology, at least for me, was that it communicated one really important message. And that was, you're perfect just the way you are. You are made in the eyes of the universe. And yeah, you have some parts that aren't so great. So does everybody.
Yeah.
And you have some stuff to do. You have a destiny. Everybody has a north node. Everybody has a destiny in their chart. So like that meant more to me than anything else. That message that I'm unique, I'm a unique person, and that I matter, and that I had a destiny in the world. How about you, Lacrosse? What was like the big takeaway for astrology for you?
For me, it's that I always I look at it like, okay, we have DNA in our body and it is unique to our physical. And to me, I believe that astrology is like the blueprint, like your DNA in the stars. It's unique to you, and there's nobody else like you, nobody even remotely close. And just seeing that blueprint, that you don't have to go far. You just got to look up, and here's this full blueprint, and explain so much. Like, I used to not understand certain parts. I'm like, I'm a Libra. Why isn't that like that? Why do I act like this? That's not Libra. And literally doing my chart and being able to look at that and see that blueprint, and you get that like, aha, oh, now I get it. I have this and I have, it's not just what's your sign? Are you a Libra? It's not like that. It's so intense and so much more. So to me, it's just literally showed me how to understand myself better. And to me, that's like key, because I'm always trying to figure myself out.
Hey, I totally get it. Me too. I spend a
Yeah.
lot of time in self-reflection and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the thing about, I want to say, hey, Joe, Joe's like, he's making a joke. I'm a Sagittarius. It means I'm a deadly centaur that shoots douchebags balls with arrows. I don't know about that, Joseph,
Yeah.
but that's his expertise, he says.
There
That's
you go.
my
There you
expertise.
go.
Hey, Joe, I'm so glad you're here, because you know what? We have a couple of experts on today's show
Yeah.
that I think will really help open things up. So I'm going to bring out one particular first person I'm going to bring out is special to me. First of all, you got some people that have watched the show for a while now know Cricket. Cricket has come on and does a public ritual with us sometimes. And Cricket's partner is KC Wilkerson. So I'm going to bring out KC. KC and I. Welcome,
Hi,
KC.
how are you?
Welcome, KC. Can you
Hello.
tell us about who you are?
Well, I'm just an ordinary guy who pretty much has figured out how to be happy all the time. And I started studying astrology as part of another class, an alchemy class where you learn to make medicines and strengthen herbal remedies and things like that. And it goes on to even more complicated things with minerals and metals, but I do the herbs. And I learned astrology as part of that system. And what it showed me since then is, like you were mentioning, Lacrosse, about how, it helps you know yourself. Know thyself is an old edict from alchemical history, ancient history. And it also helped me know what was in the air, because I could see it in my experiments. They said, this is what happens. This happens easier when the astrology is in this situation. And there's a lot of examples of that. And I would do the experiments and see that they were right. Maybe it's the power of my mind, but I don't think so, because I was just objectively watching. And over 35 years of experimentation with ancient alchemical recipes, I realized that astrology is an observable influence. Okay, now that's on the physical level. And it turns out that sidereal astrology, or astronomical astrology, seems to be more accurate in the laboratory. And so that got me into looking at sidereal astrology, which even helped me go further into knowing who I am as an individual. Whereas tropical astrology is more about how we interrelate, maybe how we see each other, more social, practical things. But for the deep dive, it's sidereal. It led me to sidereal astrology. And I ended up writing a book, that talks about both a little bit, but it's more of a handbook for alchemists. So who am I as a person? I like to investigate. I like to, like you said, dive deep and get into who I am and what are my strengths. And astrology would say, well, according to the chart, you should be strong in this area. And then I either know immediately, or I go explore and say, wow, I am, and things that I've tried that aren't in my chart are like, okay, well, that could be why it was such a struggle, because I was learning something absolutely new to me. I had no foundation in astrology. So I'm a perpetual seeker who is also a finder and knows that there's more to learn. The older I get, the more I know what I don't know, and realize there must be a lot that I don't know.
Well, Casey, I always appreciate your astrology input, and sharing alchemy with you too is also special. And so I want to tell everybody, Joe, and everybody watching the show, the next expert that I managed to invite to the show, I was super excited because, well, I took his classes, and I was like, and I'm remember, if you want to look it up, Nadia Shah, and she offers classes, and I found her class, and her and anyway, so I took her classes, and that was really helpful in learning about astrology and figuring out what that meant. So anyway, it looks like we might be having a technical difficulty. So we'll just continue on with our discussion about astrology, and just talking about, you know, I think the most important thing about astrology for me was figuring out how it applies in my life, like how it works in my life, um, how it unfolds in my life, how, like, when the moon is in Pisces, how I feel different than when the moon is in Libra, and things like that. And I think that watching, like, that's one of the ways, like, to really get to know astrology and how it influences you, is to watch something like the moon, because it changes. How often does it change signs, Casey? Like, what,
2 or
like
3
once
days.
every, right?
Yeah, every 2 or 3 days it goes into a different sign. It's got to go through 12 signs in about 28 days.
Right. So, and then when it's full, of course, it influences us more differently than it does when it's not, when it's new, right?
Well, especially for those whose natal moon matches where the moon is at that time. Like if you were born on the moon in Pisces and that night there's a full moon in Pisces, you're going to feel it more than anybody else. Everyone's going to feel it, the full moon. The energy that it brings, it just stirs up life around the planet. We feel that. There's light at night, so things are moving around. We can feel that kind of thing. So when the police or the ER personnel, they say, oh yeah, full moon, there's always more people, but they don't ask them what their natal moon is, because it may be that 1 in 12 people on average has that moon, and they feel the energy even more because it's right in line with their DNA, their astrological DNA. And it also sets our DNA when we're born and we take our first breath. Whatever star influences are there, that's your first experience. You're protected. You're in a Faraday cage kind of in the womb. Once you come out, it's like, not only is there this whole breath thing going on, but you can feel all the energy of all the stars, and it imprints the DNA, the cells in your body, to have certain awarenesses, which can bring you strength or cause you lessons.
Yeah, and maybe it's a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, so that full moon, there's 1 in 12 people are going to be more active than normal. And so that is noticeable. But some people are like, full moon doesn't affect me. Yeah, well, wait until it's in your sign. Your birth, the sign you were born, it was born to you in. Like I have a Cancer moon. And so, and it happens to be coming up in the morning. I've had astrologers say, well, how do you just not sit around the house and cry all the time? It's like, well, that does happen, but I'm used to it by now. So it depends on your moon. You got a Leo moon, the moon's full in Leo, you're going to feel it. You're going to be out growling around probably,
Right, exactly. Anyway, I was going to ask you, could you help us understand what the difference, like, some people are like, if they listen to your introduction, they probably heard you say tropical astrology and sidereal astrology. Could you help us understand what that is?
Right. Well, what happened was, I think someone from Greece, probably, like you mentioned, went to Egypt and said, we found astrology, and they brought it back to Greece. And somewhere they didn't get the memo that the stars move. They're not always in the same place. They move like a 1 degree or 1.5 degrees, somewhere in there, like every 70 years. So they go get this information about astrology, and at the time, everything lined up, and they bring it back to Greece without the memo that the stars moved. So the tropical chart is actually a representation of the sky in the year 200, approximately 200 current era.
Okay.
And so it used to be astronomically aligned right with where the planets actually are at. And the Egyptians knew that they had to keep that updated. They had to move all those stars over a degree. That message didn't get to the West. And so we use the chart from those times that also happen to be lined up to the seasons in a logical way. So anyway, tropical astrology is like other divining systems. And it's based on the energy that a lot of people believe it. It's actually a progressed chart by about 25 years or so. So it could be helpful to know your chart growing up because that's what you're going to be coming into. But sidereal astrology is when you look up in the sky and see Antares, and it's a bright star in the sky, you know what constellation it's in, and you see a planet move in front of it. That's the astronomy. And that's what sidereal astrology is. It realigns all the planets back up with the stars so that the planets can be easily or more easily observed, giving their influence to that star influence. Like, what are the zodiac signs based on? They're based on the energy of the stars within the constellation in that 30-degree section. Well, now you move that over, and those stars kind of have to loop around to get in through the funnel to be, the sun does what's called gravitational lensing. It takes any influence behind it and bends it around and focuses it. And so then all the planets, being around like a pinball machine in that focus. Have you ever wondered, the sun is in Libra, and how do you know that? Because at night, the constellation across from it is the one that's in the night sky. How did ancient people know that the stars behind the sun gravitationally were focused around the sun and into the planets, and that's the one of major influence during that period of time? How did they know that? They had to figure out that the stars are going around us and then deduce which one was behind the sun, and that's the one of effect for that day. It's amazing. Maybe someone who had been to space came and told them. But that's another podcast.
That's a different show. Hey, Casey, that I appreciate. Thank you so much for just defining those two types of different. I know that's just tons of different perspectives, and I appreciate them. So thanks for helping us define what that is. And so our other guest, I want to tell you, was a teacher, and I took his classes, and I found them. First of all, the number one thing that I noticed, because I take a lot of astrology classes, was I was like, wow, this guy did not gender Mercury. Because for me, Mercury is kind of a balance of both. And he didn't do that. And for me, that was like, wow, oh, maybe he's an ally. I don't know. Maybe he's queer or something. I don't know. But for me, I was like, oh, because I feel like when someone calls Mercury he or she, which usually it's he, I'm like, you're misgendering Mercury. Mercury should be they. And I'm like, it's so important for gender variant people to be seen in the world. Please, astrologers, please help us. And so that's what made this teacher really stand out. But what made this teacher also stand out was that I learned the foundation of just traditional astrology, so that I had somewhere to go from. So I had somewhere to grow. So I'm going to welcome on the show now, Michael Barwick. Welcome, Michael. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
It's a pleasure, truly a pleasure to be part of your program here. I'm been enjoying some Mercury retrograde technical problems, but I'm here, and I'm here to stay. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. Tell us about who you are. What brought you to astrology?
Well, um, I grew up at a certain era when astrology was popular, and I was young. I was a young kid, but my parents, in their wisdom, moved us out to a much more rural area with their eccentric book collection in the 70s. And I picked up a book on astrology as a kid, like before the age of 10. I was reading, Joseph F. Goodovich, Astrology, Write Your Own Horoscope, and comparing classmates. I get their birth information. It's a crude book in terms of just a natal approach, but I was comparing, looking at people's, horoscopes. And what came out of that was my parents eventually would wheel me out at their parties. And this was like, I think I was like maybe 11 or 12 when this would happen. And I would read for adults, in a room full of adults, right? Um, so, and it was, I mean, I'm sure, like, the astrology of an 11-year-old who's, knows a few things, but not very much. But it was a major hobby. I didn't take it up particularly. I just, at one point in my life, I had a lot of time to read, and I was bitten by the bug in a really deep way that I hadn't been before. And I didn't set out to be a professional. That's not my objective. I I just was looking at charts, and as one does, you look at your friends and family and so forth. And then you want to look at other people's charts, and so people hear that you're looking at charts and you're not charging anything, and then before you know it, you're seeing more and more people who want to talk to you, and you're learning, and then finally somebody paid me. And the light bulb went off in my head that perhaps I could use some of this money, these resources, to pay for the books and the conferences and the investing that I was doing in absorbing information in the field. So that was really when I became a professional. That's more sort of my story in terms of a professional, but that was long, long ago. And from there, I studied in the local scene here in Toronto where I live, and with a number of astrologers, and got involved in the local group and all those kinds of things. And you build a practice. People see you and they want to keep seeing you, and you're offering a service that they find helpful. And in terms of where it led me spiritually, like I astrology led me to my faith. So I'm in this place where I find myself, I say to my friends, how many queer Catholic astrologers do you know, right? And the answer is not many. Not many. Um, so, and the short story about that is that I was preparing for a conference that I was speaking at and giving a keynote address, and I was doing research and into the intellectual tradition of the Western world to sort of support the argument that I was making in this keynote address that I was doing. Really was too long for a keynote address. It was a seminar. But anyway, in the process of doing that, I read about um, I read about the history of the West and about thinkers in the West, including leading into the life of the Roman Catholic Church, and in the process of reading a very good book. Shout out to Richard Tarnas, The Passion of the Western Mind, also an astrologer as well, and writer of Cosmos and Psyche. I didn't know he was an astrologer, but I was reading his history book at the time. And in the process of reading that, I had an experience that sent me into Catholicism, much to my surprise, and the surprise of the entire astrological community that I was growing up in Toronto. Um, but I persisted, and part of the process for me in terms of being a convert to Roman Catholicism was that I went, well, there isn't a group for LGBTQ people? Where's the group for LGBT? Where's the ministry for that? Right? And I and others, admittedly, worked to create a ministry inside of my parish where queer Catholics could come to experience uh, a safe space to experience the sacraments. Um, and the process of of creating that made me out in a way that I had never been out before. Because when you're out in a Roman Catholic church and going to it with your married husband, you're witnessing to a reality in terms of their congregation. But it leaves me, of course, in this place where no matter who I talk to, there's somebody who will say, but you can't be all those things. You can't possibly be those things. And yet I attest to the reality that I am. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm grateful that you made it. That you found astrology and that you found your faith, whatever that
Yeah.
is, and that you've created safe space. Because for sure, we talk about it sometimes that the Christian church hasn't always been welcoming
No.
to queers, and it makes it hard. And Lacrosse here grew up in Pentecostal, right?
Yes.
You could tell us Lacrosse.
Yeah, it was
And
very old Pentecostal. Like, you don't cut your hair, you don't wear makeup, you only wear dresses, you only do things a certain way, very strict. And being queer was no,
Yeah.
unheard of and unaccepted. So yeah.
Well,
so
as critical as one can be about the Catholic Church, and I'm as critical as the next person in terms of the institutional horrors that have been perpetrated by those who claim to be directed by Jesus's love, right? Like, I mean, I'm aware of the problems within the tradition. Very aware. We're all very aware, particularly in Canada, with some of the revelations that have come recently about Aboriginal children and so forth. So, I mean, it's Indigenous folks and how they've been treated is a whole other story. But in the faith of Catholicism, even there, yes, they say nasty things, but even there, there is an acknowledgement that there is a place for queer folk in the church. And I can assure you that for the discerning eye looking out in a congregation in any Catholic church, not just mine, my particular parish, you'll see same-sex couples together going to mass. This is not some kind of revolutionary thing. In any urban center, you're going to see that. So, and the church has to, in terms of creating a ministry, as long as we were not going to rock the boat and we were going to be in a position and build our ministry around hospitality and providing a safe space, they had no issue. They could have no issue. And that's what they're here to do, supposedly. And many forces inside the church, are calling for, pushing to the margins, and the people who are the most marginalized are certainly within the church, and even arguably within society at large, are, our tribe of queer folk.
yeah, and I find that when we celebrate our queer folk, whoever they are, just like if we can learn from the indigenous culture, they name their queer folk Two Spirit, and in that, that becomes their identity, and they're special because of it. And I think that that's a gift. And that's what Rainbow Soul is all about. We're all about here to tell people, to reach out to all of the people watching, that if you're queer, regardless of how that comes for you, no matter what, you are sacred. And that's the answer. You are
Yeah,
a sacred person, just the way you are.
absolutely. To address the earlier point that you were making, that I said that, I didn't assign a gender or didn't gender Mercury. I really do believe, and this isn't just me. I mean, this is this is implied by anybody who knows, who has a deeper appreciation for the symbolism that astrology is based, that all the planets are they, them. All of them are, right? Like there are, divine personalities that, can be attributed to those planetary energies. Because when we're talking about the planets, as tempting as it is to sort of anchor it solely in a Greco-Roman understanding of the world, we're talking about categories of things, not things in themselves. They are symbols after all to us as astrologers. So to say that Mars can't be a woman or that Venus can't be a man is naive, particularly when applied to natal interpretation for human beings.
And
Because
I
there's
think when it becomes really important though, Michael, is like when we're listening, like if Lacrosse and I are listening to something on YouTube or something like that, and we're listening to the astrologer tell us about, the transits that are coming up. And if you don't do this, if you're a listener and you don't do this, I strongly suggest that you do. Find some astrologers that you vibe with and listen to their predictions. And when you do, if that person, so if here I am listening to your class, Michael, and I didn't know you, and all of a sudden you're not gendering it, and it when they do gender it, when they do say he for Mars and she for Venus, and they start doing that, they never include they. And then you're like, I'm still invisible. My gender is still invisible. And it's not, it's part of what, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't do it to me personally. I'm a gender activist. So I'm like, change your language. I want to call them on the phone, right? I want to email them. But what happens to other people that are not as secure, they start to say, I guess I don't matter. Because
because they're not represented. They don't feel that they're represented. But the truth of it is that every symbol is a pebble thrown into a pool, right? It ripples out, many associations, many connections. So in that process, you can't just say, "Oh, it's a masculine pebble," or a feminine pebble. Like you can't just say that this symbol is somehow gendered. Now you can talk about sort of this concave convex kind of idea and sort of neutralize it from the idea of human persons, right? The idea of pushing something out. But to say that pushing something out is inherently masculine is ridiculous, because women push out babies. That's as projecting something out as you can, right? So this idea of concave convex is sort of more of how I think about it, and it's an abstraction. It's not about masculine and feminine in human beings, because human beings are a spectrum of and are diverse around this question. um, if there's anything that going to pride parades, not so much the parade, but really sort of being in the neighborhood when pride is on in Toronto, is appreciating the sheer diversity of the tribe. The sheer diversity of it is just so fantastic.
absolutely, the diversity of humans. And I think that also comes through when you start looking at people's astrology charts.
Oh,
When
definitely.
when you start looking at astrology charts, you start to realize that each and every single person is unique, and you're uniquely here. So I was hoping that we could talk about that, like the way, like just even twins, right? Has anyone ever looked at twins
Oh yeah.
astrology charts? Have you? I haven't had that opportunity, Michael. Can you tell us like what was the difference between their charts? Like, did they have a lot of difference?
Well, it all is, astrology is about time and space. So, some twins are born within minutes of each other. And so their charts are very similar, very, very similar. But there are ways to measure slight, subtler differences between two horoscopes. And those differences, whatever they are, how minuscule they may be, the the twins will play them out, polarize around those lines. Sometimes you'll see, you get these planets and I get these planets, right? Because planets are, planets are the movers and shakers in astrology. We think popularly, astrology is understood in terms of signs. I'm a Virgo, you're a Libra, whatever. But the real movers and shakers in astrology are the planetary energies. They are the driving force of what is in the craft. So when you look at twins, you can see sort of this polarization. Okay, you get the sun, I'll have the moon. You have Venus, I'll have Mars. You will share Mercury, and so on, right? And polarize along that line, and whatever subtle differences there are will be played up. One time I was looking at the charts of a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, and as is often the I mean, it's so interesting. So they had a slight difference that indicated that she would be the girl would be more, more aggressive, more assertive than the boy would be, more sort of type B, to go to that kind of personality level, like that there would be this subtle difference between the two of them, that she would be more motivated, even though she was the younger twin, she would be more sort of driven. And that is in fact what was the case, as it turned out to be. So you can measure for subtle differences and be able to, draw some conjecture about what's likely to occur. At least as I think, astrology gives us, is this is the acorn. It will be an oak tree. What is the nature of this oak tree? We have an understanding of it because we have the picture of it. What it would be, what it could be if it had everything. If it got it all, this is what it would look like the picture on the seed packet, right? That's what the chart is. Like, this is under optimal growing conditions. This is what you can expect. But of course, when does a plant turn out to be the way it is on the seed package, right? Not quite. So life happens, and there's lots that's in life that's not in the chart. Like a lot of these questions of queerness are not in the chart, like, despite what people may think and have told you, it's not in the chart. Gender isn't the chart. The fact that it's a human being isn't announced in the horoscope at all. So it could be a chicken for all you know. You don't know the nature of the entity that has the horoscope that is before you. But if you apply it to a human being, you can make some informed observations about what it's telling you and share those. And as an astrologer, as you develop your craft, people appreciate what it is you have to say.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have asked the question about exactly what you mentioned, Michael, is like, can you see that we're queer in the charts? And a lot of people say yes, some people say no, and I'm like, I don't know. So I just started asking every queer person I know if they're willing, and I just started looking. And it can sometimes make sense, my Uranus is on my ascendant. Okay. Therefore I'm non-binary, right? And
Yeah.
and it also means a lot of other things. Like, I'm kind of out here while everyone else is over here, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of, but I have been able to at least say, well, it makes sense. Like, I've been able to find something that makes sense for queer people, but I have not found like the same, like, every time Uranus is on the ascendant, that person is non-binary. That's not necessarily always true.
No.
So it's kind of like but queerness, but at the same time, queerness comes through like a rainbow.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many different expressions, like someone can be a gay man or a lesbian or a non-binary queer person. Lacrosse, you're trans, you're a trans man. Would you call your sexuality, would you call it queer or would you call it pan?
Well, I identify as pan, but I'm in a straight relationship. So I go by the relationships. Like I'm married and she's my wife. I'm a man. She's a woman. She likes men. I like women. So we're in a straight relationship. But it doesn't mean I'm straight. I'm just in a straight relationship.
Mm.
So I just
Right.
make it that way to tell people. But I'm pan. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what a person is. I just want to know the person. Are you beautiful? Are you amazing? Okay, great. Let's work with it.
But I find that queer is so different,
Yeah.
just like people's astrology charts. Like, so maybe that's why it's hard to pin down in an astrology chart, is because queer is as diverse as even people's astrology charts. It comes through for everybody a little differently. Even non-binary people that I identify with, we've come to it in different ways. I'm still a trans man, even though I haven't taken hormones and done the whole thing. I'm still a trans man and I identify with that part with lacrosse, but I'm also non-binary. So like, it's different for all of us.
Yeah.
So and so I wanted to talk about I love that everybody's queuing in saying all kinds of things. Eve, first of all, said, interesting you say that, as Mercury is a communicator. So in many ways, Mercury is the planet of we. That's that. Yeah, I guess it is a little bit. Facilitating communication and cooperation if we embrace its energy. I think Pluto is also kind of like that. Isn't that kind of Pluto? If I remember correctly, Pluto kind of embraces the collective. If I guess everybody sees it differently, but that's one of the ways that I've seen it. And that's the other interesting thing, is in astrology. Here we have, I'm what I would call an amateur astrologer. Lacrosse is just learning.
I'm a baby.
And, and then we have KC over here, who does a variety of different like types of astrology, and you, Michael. And so like we have this, there's so many different perceptions of astrology. And so how do new seekers, how do we grasp that? Like, because for me, for a while, I started looking for facts and then started to realize that there weren't any.
Well, I mean, yeah, it depends. Like astrology itself is diverse, right? From the outside, it's like when you say I'm an astrologer, it's like, oh, can you tell me what my sign is? Right? Like that's sort of the kind of response, because astrology, is an occult art. It is an occult art. And so it hides as these columns that's what it is. But that's not real astrology any more than advertising jingles are music. Like, sure, you could say sort of, but it's not really, it's not the depth and sophistication of the art. I see astrology as an art. I see it as a tool for enabling people to be more authentic and to make more conscious choices about how they're running their lives, how to be able to coach them, how to work with various configurations that may be challenging, and how to make the most out of what they have that is easier. But the whole chart to me is the ongoing breath of creation captured as a snapshot. Really, that's what it is. They all show up and they all have something to say. And my job, as best I can, is to read that and provide the information that the client needs to be able to accomplish their goals, whatever they may be. Even if it's to figure out, the goal is to figure out what the goal is. Um, um, then I can provide perhaps some suggestions. But you know that's astrology has no sort of organized, there are no colleges of astrologers. There is no, like, every once in a while astrologers think that the government is going to actually legislate astrologers, and like, this was big in the 80s. Believe me, in the 80s it was like at any moment they're just not going to let this go on. They're going to institutionalize us. And there are various, debates in the community about whether this was a good thing or not. And not going to happen any more than the government is going to legislate psychics, because from an outer sort of exoteric perspective, that's what astrology looks like to a lot of people, right? It doesn't look like what those who practice it know it to be for themselves. And of those of us who know and use it for ourselves, there are as many paths to get to that understanding as there are astrologers. So different people find different ways of looking, and getting to the truth that astrology can take them to. And we can get, wrapped up about, well, I use this, or I don't use that, or I use this technique, or I don't use that technique, or and so on. Enamored with these kinds of details. But in the end of the day, astrology is a finger pointing at the moon. And it's not about the finger, it's what it's pointing to that's important. And that's why I use it as a tool.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Michael. Really well said. And like for me, astrology is definitely like there's vibrations that you feel, and I've actually had to spend some time like getting in touch with each planet, and sort of like you do with your chakras, or a plant, right? And Casey, I wanted to talk about like alchemy astrology, like the form of astrology that you're familiar with. Like when I think of alchemy, I think of the magic of turning lead into gold. And for some of you that don't know, if you're a magic practitioner of alchemy, turning lead into gold is not usually the literal sense. Like that's just kind of like a front that they put forward. But in actuality, alchemy, some people believe that alchemy is the art of turning your shadow or your not so great parts into gold, or bringing them out. So KC, so the astrology book that you wrote, right? You have like a together with alchemy astrology. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what it means to turn lead into gold and things like that?
Yeah, well, part of alchemy was the biggest part of it is watching nature and observing things in nature, and then trying to maybe reproduce them, what we call synthetically, but in an artificial environment, and then maybe even advance that a little bit. Maybe make it more pure and more powerful and useful. So it's all about trying to upgrade nature, observing nature, using nature's rules to speed up the evolution. And the idea is that gold is the highest evolved matter on the planet. And so that if you took lead and you purified it and you brought its vibration higher and you did the different alchemical processes, you could make that into gold. You could convert it. Now, in science, they've done it. They took mercury and they bombarded it with 50, 1,000 million, volts of electricity, which wasn't cheap to create, right? To create all this electricity, but they bombarded the mercury and popped a proton, or maybe a protein, popped a proton out of it, and it turned into gold. Then they tried doing this, lowering mercury down into a nuclear reactor and just leaving it down there, and it did the same thing. It bumped out a proton and turned it into gold. Now, the cost of doing that is way more than what the gold was worth, but they proved it's possible. All right. So you got plants, right? And if you ferment them, their spirit is released, and we call that alcohol, and that's why they call alcohol spirits, because it's the spirit of the plant kingdom. And you use yeast to do that. They're these little creatures that help the alchemist, it's part of nature, break it down. So what if there's something like yeast for metals and minerals? Well, there happens to be if you go to Yellowstone, and you can see all these colored pools. That's because they're at different temperatures, and each temperature supports a different kind of bacterium called extremophiles, and they can actually convert minerals. I forget, they call them lithobacteria or something like that. They eat stones. So what if one of those created a catalyst that could pop that proton out of mercury? If you collected that catalyst, just like you collect the yeast and get the alcohol, you could collect these extremophiles and get the substance that would turn a base metal into gold. So I think it's all possible. And I could go on about that for a long time. And what they found was that in these processes, there were the stars being in different places seemed to affect the experiments differently. Like the experiment could be repeated easier when the moon was in a certain sign, and mostly it's the moon. So they observed, like, moon in Aries is a fire sign, right? Well, if you have a campfire with the moon in Aries, you might have to have more wood that night because it's going to burn hotter. Or if you're cooking, you might not need as much wood. Wow, we did that whole meal with only a little bit of wood because it burned hotter. And these are observable things that the alchemists compared to what they see going on Earth. Like when a lake dries up, you see these crystals grow out of it. It's some kind of niter. Well, the alchemists saw that process and wanted to duplicate it with other substances so they could purify these other substances. And you could even make your own little compost pile with specific things in it to extract these minerals that they would use for their experiments. Well, those minerals extracted easier when the moon was in a certain spot. And all of these observations for years and years, just like with astrology, the beauty of astrology is these are all clinical type observations made over thousands and thousands of years. And sure, things change. We change our position in the galaxy of the Milky Way. Things are bound to change a little bit, but you can see trends. And like Mercury, the planet Mercury is symbolic of the metal mercury, which is very reflective. So in communication, you need some reflection too, or you're just talking to yourself. There's no real communication. So Mercury adapts its gender to the sign that it's in. And the signs go, plus, minus, persistent, receptive. And you could call it male and female, but that just happens to be a coincidence on the physical plane for now. So anyway, and if there's a planet in that sign that's close to Mercury, it'll take the gender of that planet. So when you're calculating your positives and negative influences for the day for your experiment, you have to figure out where Mercury is. Now, what if there's a positive planet and a negative planet in a negative sign near Mercury? And then, there's ways to figure out what Mercury's gender is for that chart. And only because it's a plus, it's a penetrative energy you need in the lab, or it's a receptive energy you need in the lab. And that's how the astrology works in the physical. It wasn't until much later that I started learning astrology in 1983, and in 2011, I became professional with people's charts. So I did it for many years and watched these observations and figured it out. And I noticed that there's a lot of other factors when it comes to gender. And I like to think that, we're all born with both possibilities, and we tend to choose based on a lot of different things. Astrology seems to get me in touch with the foundation of who I am, like the basic abilities and stuff. So, I could use that and look at that and see which gender association would be most appropriate for me. So, I don't think the chart is our destiny so much as it is our tools to make the trip. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It does. And I think there's a lot of different perspectives about it. And that's the thing about astrology, is that there's so many different perspectives and so many different ways that people come at it. So Lacrosse, while you're learning, and anyone else out there that's learning, the one thing that I've learned about learning astrology is don't try to look for the facts. Just don't. Instead, see how it feels for you. See how it feels for you. Observe and see how it feels for you. How does Mars feel when it goes retrograde for you in your world? How does Mercury feel when it goes retrograde? And then listen to other astrologers and allow their input in and see how you feel about it. Like, it really is about your inner senses and your inner instinct, your calling. And I found that even learning how to read other people's charts, it's best to kind of follow your instinct. And you will apply some of the things that you learn in the classes, or whatever, however you learn, whether you read a book or take a class or whatever you do to learn, you'll apply those things. But like, check in every time something comes in. So every time something comes in, and I think you're good at that, Lacrosse. You're good at checking in, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
so I want to let you know, the audience, you guys, if you have a dream, put it in the comments. We're going to take a quick break and see if there's any dreams. And when we come back, I'm hoping to talk about what exactly can astrology teach us? What can it show us about our lives? And how can we use it? You know, we can use it for guidance if we see an astrologer, but if we start learning it, how can we use it? How can we use it in our everyday lives to help us learn and help us live a better life or a fuller life? In the meantime, we're going to take a little break. Remember, post your dreams in the comments, my friends, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So what exactly does that mean? It is a figure of speech in reference to a person who has dabbled in many things rather than gaining expertise by only focusing on one. So much knowledge and wisdom out there at our fingertips, yet so difficult to grasp. Everything and everyone has a little piece of the truth, and it is up to us to determine what our truth is. In this busy world, creating the time, the space to nourish our bodies, mind, and soul has become a difficult task. So let's take a moment to learn something small, in whatever way the universe decides to reveal it. It could be someone's story, a quote, a spiritual practice, maybe a song or a movie. The opportunities are limitless and all around us if we just take a moment to see. We are all students of life experiences, so let us learn from one another. There is no right or wrong path. There is only your path and your journey. So let's begin our adventure and explore all the world has to offer, and let us become a master of none.
All right. Welcome
right.
back. Oh, Lacrosse, looks like you got a dream here.
I
Looks
was
like
reading it, but it doesn't. I don't know if it's not finished. So I'm gonna
well,
kind of.
they'll probably put the second half. Let's read the first part here. Eve said that they had a very weird dream last night. I was on a multi-level ship. I was sitting on the floor at the top of the set of stairs, uncertain how I had gotten there, and I realized my wheelchair was missing. So I had to pull myself by my arms, specifically my elbows, down steps across the floors to where my chair should have been at the bottom of the first set of stairs. I saw my manual chair there and think it was on the ship, but as the ship started moving, I was trying to figure out why. Okay. And then I assume that they'll probably put the other half in the chat in a minute. I'm sure that they are. That's already like realizing that their chair was not there, which feels like that's their legs, that's
Right,
Eve's
right,
legs.
right. And also, like when you think of the chair or your legs, it's like what grounds you. It's what keeps you, stable and steady. Um, it's like consistent there, like multi levels, many layers. Not feeling that you don't really know where you're at because there's so many levels on that ship. But they were planted on the top. Which I thought was interesting. I think that's what it said.
Okay, now they're saying
Okay.
why had not brought my power chair, sorry, or used the elevator lift. There were 3 levels with various sections.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So could you put the other one right back up there real
Sure,
quick?
yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. So we were
So they said as the
down.
ship
All
started
right.
moving, I was trying to figure out why they had not brought my power chair or used the elevator lift. So, okay.
Basically, what I'm getting from this is like a constant struggle on I don't know if it's spirituality or on just when I think of levels, I'm getting layers, like all these different layers. And what I'm not understanding is if you were on top, why were you going backwards, like going back down, and then wondering why. Now, you said the wheelchair wasn't there, but there was an electrical chair, which would have been much more easier. So I'm like, what tools, why were you trying to get to the one when the other one that's electrical, which is easier to use, you didn't go for that one? So I'm a little curious on why.
I think that's
Yeah.
their confusion too.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I guess the whole point is you're having these struggles, your resources, an easier resources there for you to grasp, but you're trying to go back to older resources. So what I'm getting from that is it's all these layers, and you're going through all these layers, but you're not grabbing the more easier resource to get through these layers. You're going back to older resources to get through these layers. So maybe it's trying to tell you, or the universe is trying to tell you, why don't you try using the easier levels? Why don't you try? Sometimes the older stuff doesn't work, and you might be going on different levels. And if you notice a ship is constantly moving, it's constantly shifting, and you're people get sick. You could lose your balance easy. So you're already on a rocky thing, So, oh. They wrote something else.
They said, kind of how did I get up there and why had I brought my manual chair and that it had not been up with me? Had nothing really known about the elevator existing until the end.
Okay, so now so literally it's pretty consistent. You have the resources to get through your layers. You have the resources to keep elevating yourself. Maybe you're kind of doing it the hard way instead of doing it, the elevator's there, the electric chair is there, the resources, the easier resources are there, the knowledge is there. So it's about changing maybe your perspective or changing your way on trying to get through these layers. I don't know what the layers are, but that's kind of what I'm getting. So And Hollis, if you have this way, if you
Yeah.
have any input, yeah, but that's kind of what I'm getting. It's kind of like you're doing the hard way, and you don't have
Yeah.
to.
Like it might be one of those times, like, I don't know about you, Lacrosse, but like you've always done it this way. And
Right.
alternatively, you've done that, but you
Right.
never considered these 5
These.
things over
Right.
here.
Right. Which could possibly make it even easier. So maybe just start looking at your alternatives and changing that perspective a little bit, because the old ones, it's not that they don't work. It's just, why do harder work? You know, I mean, and we're human. We're like, it's what we do. But
Yeah,
yeah,
often. But Eve says that makes sense. So that's sweet. So I don't know. I know that they have a lot going on in their life.
yeah,
And so, you know, it could be probably tons of different things. And
right.
so, um, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Eve. I appreciate you sharing your dream.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank you.
bringing that forward. Because just like seeing other people's dreams interpreted, then you can apply that to your own dream. You know,
Yeah,
you can totally take that in. So if you're having something that you don't want to share publicly, you don't want to share on this public form, you know, format, you can totally apply some of the same ideas to your
right.
own dream interpretation.
Yeah,
So, my friends, I thought we'd finish up our discussion about astrology. So, let's bring out Casey and Michael. Welcome back, guys. And I just want to say that I so appreciate you being on the show today and helping our viewers get to, and our listeners really get what astrology is. And I just want to say, if a person asked you, why bother with astrology? What would you say to them? Would you, if they were genuinely asking, not in a sarcastic way, but in a more like, what could I get out of astrology? What why would it be good for me? What would your answer be?
Well, do you check the weather report? Because it's kind of like that for me. I mean, see what's in the air. You know, what's the ambiance for the day? You know, is Mars firing away at everybody? You know, is the moon detached, and that's why nobody seems to care today? Is it in a that would be in Aquarius, just emotionally detached, moon in Aquarius. That's good to know. You might take that personally. Huh, nobody would talk to me today at work. You know, I was like, well, nobody talked to anybody else either. They were just totally emotionally detached. You know, and I find that helpful. You know, it's like navigation.
How about you, Michael?
Well, uh, how are you managing without astrology is my question. Like, um, because I honestly don't. It's so much a part of my way of functioning that I can't imagine. Um, well, I mean, it gives you insight into the seasons of your life. The natal chart is nothing less than the energy grid that wires you to the rest of creation. Why wouldn't you want to have this knowledge? Why wouldn't you? Like it's too useful. The thing is that astrology hides so well, right? Occult means hidden. Like there's this big scary word occult. It's October, it's Halloween, we can get all freaked out. But occult just means hidden. And astrology is hidden in plain sight. It's in the newspaper. That's how plain sight it is. But it does not betray what it is unless you go into it and pursue it and see where it takes you. But once you have it, then, at the very least, you can name your pain and know when it's going to leave, right? Like that's at least that, which for some people is half the battle. I'm going through, whatever planet it is that's doing whatever it is to whatever point in my chart that it's doing it to, and I feel like crap. When is it going to end? Well, but while you're going through this, whatever this is, if it's giving you nothing but lemons, then, you got to make lemonade out of it. And then I talk about ways of doing that. it's just too practical a tool, and it's just too applicable to too many dimensions of human experience for me not to have that vision, not to have that kind of vision into the nature of the moments that I'm looking at, whether it's a natal chart or whether it's, patterns that are upcoming.
One of the things that I was able to witness was that, I was born into a shitty family. I was born in a not great situation. And my Chiron is retrograde in my natal chart, right? And so sometimes we notice that when people are born with this, that sometimes they're born into not the greatest of families. Not that any family is perfect, because that's certainly not true, but I was born in a particularly unusually gross family. And
Mm.
so what I want to say about that is I used to take it personally. And I used to say there were times that I was a cutter and that I was suicidal in the early part of my life. And I used to think, like, I used to really see myself as a victim because of what I was born into. And somebody looked at my astrology chart, and she was actually like my witchy mama. Okay, she's an astrology mama. Okay, and she was the one that looked at it, and she said, well, maybe this is all for a reason. And eventually I came to terms with, in my Saturn returns, during that season of my life. And Saturn returns just means that Saturn comes back around to where it is when you were born. And so when it returns to you, it often brings a lot of lessons and learning and awareness and awakenings. And I woke up and it said, "You're Chiron. You were born in that situation you were born in so that you could write this book and show people how to overcome trauma." Because I have huge trauma, crap that people read my story and they cry. And that's what's in here is my story. Half of the book is my story. And that's exactly why it was so important. And that's why Chiron is in retrograde. I had to learn and figure out that even though I was born into that trauma, so if you're born into trauma, even though, yes, you were actually a victim, there is medicine to be harvested, especially when you learn about the story of Chiron, and how he is a wounded healer, and how those wounds that you have, whatever they may be, because I know there's some ugly ones out there in the world. There's some people are born into some really ugly shit. And I'm just going to say, being real, that if you learn your astrology, you might just learn that in your chart, you are meant to be a healer. You're meant to bring that forward and show us how to maybe help other people heal.
Well, certainly,
Maybe.
certainly Chiron is, associated with sort of the shamanic experience of being ripped to pieces and having to reformulate oneself again. That is, found in many traditions in the world in terms of this sort of psychological breakdown and reconstruction, and shape shifting and all kinds of things that fit into Chiron. Chiron's a fascinating new celestial body. So it's modern. It's late 70s kind of thinking. So it reflects something of that time period. But what you're talking about in terms of, certainly people talk about it in relationship to wounding, and particularly when it's tied to particular planets. You'd have to look at the whole. As I always tell people, you have to look at the whole context of the chart. It's dangerous to sort of say, well, everybody who has, what X is going to experience Y, because that's not necessarily true. Because when we were talking earlier about sort of questions of queerness being shown in horoscopes, if you look at a bunch of straight people's charts, you're going to find just as much stuff that could say, hey, this is queer, this is odd, that you'd find, I'm sure, than you find in queer folks. And the question of, does the cosmos operate in the same categories that we do in terms of thinking about things? And I think that it's a lot more loose than that. And there's other factors that play a role in terms of what one grows into, how much of that pattern that one is able to embody in a healthy way in a world where, let's face it, to be real, there is violence and injustice on a gross scale going on, and there's always been violence and injustice on a gross scale, and the sad thing is there probably always will be violence and injustice in the world, to some degree. Hopefully we can make it better, and that's part of the thinking of our time as moderns, that things will improve, they will progress, and there is evidence for that. Certainly it's not where it should be, but there's way more acceptance in some parts of the world for queer folks. Not everywhere, not universally, but in some parts of the world. And those of us that live in those parts of the world enjoy a level of freedom of expression that is not found elsewhere.
Yeah, and I should include that when I explored my own chart, it wasn't just Chiron. I just was fascinated with Chiron's story.
Yeah.
There's actually about, I don't know, maybe a dozen or more aspects that point to exactly what happened to me as a child and what happened to me as I grew up in that environment. And it has, and it can look different, I think, for everybody. Right. You know what I mean? Like of course, because my trauma is going to be different than someone else's trauma, and whatever we experience in life. But to have the astrology validate that, like I have Venus in retrograde, which often makes you think that you are less valued. It can sometimes influence you that way. It took me, but now in my 40s, I'm able to say, I know I have that trait about me that I sometimes undervalue myself, but now I know that part of me, and I can try to say, that's just old trauma speaking, or that's not really true. That's just because Venus is doing a crazy dance in the sky right now. And so I need to not necessarily listen to that self-talk that's not really helpful, right? Because self-talk when we think terrible things about ourselves, is not necessarily helpful in helping us grow forward.
No, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that necessarily that people with Venus retrograde are underappreciated, although a lot of people are underappreciated. So having Venus retrograde certainly can incline you in that direction. But I would more likely say that you have different values than the mainstream is what you have, right? That's how I would go at it, rather than and talk about the importance of anchoring yourself in those values. Because ultimately Venus is what gives us pleasure, what gives us that kind of joy, whether it be through beauty or physicality or conjugal love or whatever. There is this sense with Venus, it's around pleasure, and when it's retrograde, you dance to the beat of a different drummer, right? That's what you do. And the thing is to, when you have a client with Venus retrograde, is not to tell them, well, you're undervalued, but rather to tell them that you dance to the beat of a different drummer and you should take joy in it, right? You should enjoy that fact and be proud of it.
Yeah, I think for me, it actually comes through as a personal thing. Like it's not necessarily that other people undervalue me, but I undervalue me.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
And that's not helpful.
No. It's very important to contain the mind and its capacity to criticize everything. You know, we can be our own worst enemies, and that kind of inner bully has to be put down, I'm afraid. um,
Yeah.
or you're not going to get very far.
So I'm just saying that, like, as you start to explore your chart, maybe Lacrosse, you've been having some of these kind of awakenings. You said that, like, you're looking at your chart and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what that means.
Yeah.
And
And I'm on a basic, like really basic level, and I know that. So I know a lot of it are like my own thoughts, in the sense like I'm not a big Scorpio person. I don't really care for Scorpios, but found out Scorpios in there, and I'm like, yeah. No. But it's really like also in the learning. Okay, what I think about Scorpios is really just I just had a bad experience with one, and I'm projecting that and put it where it is. And astrology is helping me correct a lot of my thinking, correct a lot of my speech, correct a lot of my actions. So where normally I'd be so quick to say, I'm not even going to think, I'm going to go do it. And since I've been learning, I'm like, oh, wait, no, stop, think, listen, wait. Something's going on here. So don't be so quick to word vomit right now. Yeah. And that's what it's been doing. But I do have a question for somebody who is new and just starting out. And, some people say read a book or this or that or here or there. But I would like to know everybody's advice on what would be the proper thought process to begin. Because like when I first started and I was looking at it, I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is saying. This is just this over there and that over there. And what the hell does retrograde mean? So like, I would like to hear everybody's advice and opinion on how a person should approach when they first come, because it is intimidating.
I
Well,
teach the keyword. It seems to be the easiest. Like if you know Moon is emotional or about emotions, and Scorpio is about possessiveness or solidity, you can just take those two keywords and put them together and try to see where that applies in your life right now. Is this a strong force? Is it, you can look at the chart. So I say learn the keywords for the planets. They all have one word that generally describes them, and all the zodiac signs. Put your planets, or, do a chart online with the service or whatever, a free chart, or put your planets on the chart and write down the keywords to them, and then look at the aspects. If they're 90 degrees away, there might be a challenge between those two. Or if they're in a trine, 120 degrees away, there may be a flow of energy, or and just start with those basic keywords, and then later you can do things like add houses and look at how high up in the sky they are, the declination, and you can really just go into depth with a lot of things. But basically, it's just the 7 planets and the 12 zodiac signs, and you get an understanding of how that works, and then you can add to it anything you want. You can use an ephemeris, you can use tropical. The ephemeris shows how to convert to sidereal. That might clear up some of your Scorpio questions too. If you look at your sidereal chart, and find out you have Saturn in Scorpio, that's important to know. But when look at the tropical chart, it's in Sagittarius, so there's a big difference. So one affects you as an individual, and the other is how we relate. So they're both very important, and they work together really well. People may think you're this way, but really you're this way in sidereal. And people go, wow, that just explained my whole childhood, because I always felt this way, and people were seeing me like that. Well, no wonder they were confused, so it's really fun to play. So I say start with the keywords.
how about you, Michael?
Well, I think definitely it starts with your own chart and continues with your own chart. I also say don't be intimidated. We're all beginners, really. We're all learning.
Right.
It never ends. And even when you think you figured it all out, there are always more insights about about planet signs, houses, aspects, fixed stars, the nodes, whatever. There's more to
Right.
understand, and there's more to see. So don't be intimidated. We're all beginners. Nobody knows the whole field because it's too big to know the whole field. It's a huge field. But what you do is you gravitate to to the methods that work for you to learn the keywords, whether you do sort of a rudimentary thing in terms of build your first set of keywords, but just keep adding to it. That's what I did. I went through a process of building keywords for the signs, planets, and houses and aspects, and built my sort of theoretical understanding of it all. But I was really inspired by a lot of the books that I read, which were more sort of subject oriented. There's one book, if you're more like the workbook kind of guy who would like to go in and sort of have a workbook where you could go, oh, here's this and here's this and here's some keywords. There's a book by a workbook by Demetra George and Douglas Block called Astrology for Yourself, which I recommend often for beginners because it allows you to be able to write out all the things in your chart and explore it and get a very, very grounded education in the more modern approach, modern tropical approach to interpreting planetary placements. And signs and houses and all the rest of it. When that book came out, I wish that, oh gee, I wish I'd had this book when I first got serious. But it's a very useful book. I often recommend to beginners. And I think also immerse yourself in the get to know other enthusiasts. There are local groups, there are conferences that go on. You get to meet astrologers in person, attend lectures, and even if it's over your head, it's still you just soak up what you can. It's all over our head. It's all too much. You soak up what you can and you emerge with your understanding of the art better refined at every step.
Thank you both.
Well said.
That's why
Yeah.
I went back to the basics because there was so much information. So I went back and looked at Babylonia. They only had 8 signs. So I went a little later than that and went to 12 signs and then just studied the basics of it. And like, how does this work? And went out and looked at the planet as it went past Antares, or Jupiter and Scorpio or something. And then, yeah, take it
I
back
think
to its roots.
my astro mama, she told me to make sure that I studied myself first. She was like, study yourself first because that will teach you what you need to know. And I did get years ago, I got the book, The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need, which is a very popular book, apparently. I had no idea when I got it. I found it, and I was so proud of myself to find the book that my astro mama suggested, and happily bought it and knew she would be so proud of me. So, and it was really helpful. Actually, it was really good for the basics because it gives you those keywords and then you can study them and you can, and now of course it tells you how to actually draw a chart, which we don't have to do anymore. I was like, And of course you can bring your chart off of astro.com and do it so much easier now. My astro mom used to draw them.
Yeah, we all did. Took an hour to calculate a chart, before an hour before you could even start interpreting, and there was always a danger you'd make a mistake. So it was nerve-wracking. Now you can generate more data in seconds than you could before. It's kind of wild in a way.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much. I so appreciate you bringing astrology just to Rainbow Soul and helping us unfold why it's important in our lives. And I really enjoy talking about astrology and really enjoy learning about it from both of you. I really enjoy all the parts that you've brought. And tonight, I just want to offer a little tarot reading, and then we're going to wrap up for the night. And I just want to say that I feel blessed to have you both on the show tonight and for us to be able to talk about this. And, you know, to get it out there, that it is really important that you look at your whole chart. I'm constantly spreading that all over like Facebook groups and stuff because people, so like lacrosse, you know how you said Scorpios,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're not always real crazy about them.
Right.
Here's the hilarious part that I always point out to people. Everybody has Scorpio in their chart.
Mhm.
Every person has Sagittarius, Cancer, all of those parts are in your chart. All of us have those parts. So to hold, you know, and not every Cancer is the same because they have a different rising sign and a moon sign and a Venus and a Mars and things, other aspects that and create crazy influences. So just so you know, everybody out there listening, if you've had an experience with someone that was toxic to you or whatever, and it wasn't great, and let's just say they were a Sagittarius, and I used to actually, I did this in my 20s. My first partner was a Sagittarius. And I thought I will never go with another Sagittarius again. Right? Right? That's what I thought. And well, now I'm married to one. So just don't
Yeah.
don't do that. Don't do that to yourself because I really hesitated about being with her for a good year and we were clearly meant to be and it was a good year for me going, I don't know, she's a Sagittarius, like Sagittariuses aren't very good for me, you know, and so that's silly. Just know that every person's chart is perfectly unique and that you are a unique reflection of the stars and you are perfectly imperfect just the way you are. And so tonight I'm pulling 3 cards from the Love is Love deck, and it's all about collaboration, my favorite thing with my stellium in Libra. And I'm pulling 3 cards. Nice. So this is for anyone that's listening tonight, anyone that's listening to the recording later. If you're hearing this message, take what you like and leave the rest because if you hear something that vibrates with you, that was intended for you. If it doesn't vibrate with you, just let it go. It's probably meant for somebody else anyway. Okay? And so here we are. The first card is the 5 of Wands. It is a reminder to us to remember what we've been through. This is the fights and the disagreements, the polarization, all of the crap that the world has been through in the last whatever couple of years and for a long time. And even you personally in your life, whatever's been going on that has created fights and disagreements and butting heads and that kind of energy. That's what this is all about. It's just a reminder of that because it wants to remind you. The next card is a beautiful reminder. This beautiful queer couple coming together is it's the 4 of Wands, and you can see that they are clearly queer in some way, whether they're trans or not. But the point is that they came together in love and togetherness and in connection. They came together to celebrate who they were, uniquely perfect, just the way you are. By the way, it gets better. And so if you're listening to this and you're going, oh man, we had a disagreement, just also remember the parts that came together that were good. The stuff that the people that you've made connections with, the people that you've come together with, the people that have made beautiful, whatever it is, you know, whatever you've been up to, that's what this card is. It's to bring you to the now, to let go of the crap in the past and to come into the now. And as you go forward, remember to carry that message forward and to remember that we all go through crap all the time. That's what makes life life. Okay. And that's what makes life interesting. If it was good all the time, we'd be bored. And that's what this is about. This is about carrying your message forward. Take your message out into the world. That's what this is a reminder for. As you go forward, take what you've learned and share it with others, because that's how we learn. We can learn from each other. And that's why we're here on the planet Earth, is to help each other out. So that's what this is all about. These 3 cards, they're to remind you of the crap you've been through, the fights, the disagreements, the not so great stuff, and how you've come together with each other, and the connections you've made that have been in a good way. And don't forget to take those lessons into the world. Spread them out. Spread them so that others can hear them, so other people can learn from your experience. And that's my reading tonight, and that's the wisdom I have to offer all of you. So thank you very much, Casey and Michael Barwick. We so appreciate you. We love you. And thank you to Lacrosse for always holding the space with me. Thank you, brother. I so appreciate you.
Same.
And thank you to everybody watching the show. You are important. You are uniquely perfect just the way you are. You are imperfectly perfect just the way you are, I assure you. And you are uniquely made in a reflection of the stars. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your night. Join us here next Sunday night for Rainbow Soul. Good night.
Thank you for watching Rainbow Soul, a queer perspective on spirituality beyond religion. We appreciate you sharing the show on your timeline. Follow us on social media of your choice, and join our Facebook group, Rainbow Soul. We want to hear from you. Share your topic ideas for Hollis and Lacrosse. Explore upcoming shows and interesting guests. The Rainbow Soul Facebook group, where we build community of questioning seekers. Rainbow Soul, where spirituality is our medicine.
Jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So what exactly does that mean? It is a figure of speech in reference to a person who has dabbled in many things rather than gaining expertise by only focusing on one. So much knowledge and wisdom out there at our fingertips, yet so difficult to grasp. Everything and everyone has a little piece of the truth, and it is up to us to determine what our truth is. In this busy world, creating the time, the space to nourish our bodies, mind, and soul has become a difficult task. So let's take a moment to learn something small, in whatever way the universe decides to reveal it. It could be someone's story, a quote, a spiritual practice, maybe a song or a movie. The opportunities are limitless and all around us if we just take a moment to see. We are all students of life experiences. So let us learn from one another. There is no right or wrong path. There is only your path and your journey. So let's begin our adventure and explore all the world has to offer, and let us become a master of none.